Which villain actually had a point? Maleficent. I'm quoting here. In medieval culture, an event like a royal christening is not a private party. It's the public social event of the year. To not invite any person of rank to such an event is a deadly insult. The only way the king and queen could possibly have gotten away with not inviting Maleficent was to not invite any of the fairies at all. Inviting the other fairies and excluding her is explicitly taking sides in the conflict between the fairy factions. Which means they made themselves her sworn enemies, and she responded by treating them as such from then on. If you actually get into analyzing the social dynamics of the scene, it's very clear that Maleficent was willing to show mercy at first by giving the king and queen a chance to apologize for their disrespect to her. She doesn't curse Aurora until after she gives them that chance. Ugh. I cannot remember where I read it, but about inviting fairies at all. It went bad things happen if you invite them. Terrible things happen if you don't. Roy Batty, Blade Runner. The replicants were just trying to survive. They were created to be slaves, and despite what everyone chose to believe, the replicants had complicated human emotions and experiences. All they wanted was the chance to live a long, happy life. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, Roy's final speech, especially the tears and rain line which was an improv, was incredibly moving. A true film noir. There are no good guys, just a whole lot of grey area. Brigadier General Frank Hummel, Ed Harris in Iraq. He wants to give money to the families of Recon Marines who died on clandestine missions but who the government wouldn't compensate. The real villains were the guys who mutinied him and actually tried to launch those things. Arthas. You could argue killing everyone in Stratholme was a bit severe, but time was of the essence. They didn't know who was and wasn't infected, and the plague was something they really needed to nip in the bud. Mr. Freeze only wanted to steal enough money to invest in cryogenic research to prolong and cure his wife of cancer, but Batman kept kicking his butt lol. Mr. Freeze only wanted to steal enough money to invest in cryogenic research to prolong and cure his wife of cancer, but Batman kept kicking his butt lol. Well, in TAS, where he was most fleshed out, his wife was already in a cryogenic state when some dickwad sabotaged his experiment and mutated him. His first motivation was to kill said dickwad, and that was why Batman kicked his butt. The Giant in Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack is a thieving little crap who repeatedly breaks into the giant's house and then murders him when he gets caught. Not quite what you meant, but I find the story of Medusa quite sad. She was originally a beautiful woman. She was so beautiful that she catches the eye of Poseidon. Poseidon is a god and he gets what he wants. He wants her, so he rapes her in a temple to Athena. Athena, despite being the goddess of wisdom, is all well you should have known better than to get raped inside my temple, and she punishes Medusa by turning her into a gorgon. So Medusa has now been raped and lost everything and she can't even talk to anyone about it. Everyone that looks at her turns to stone and dies. So Medusa retreats and lives in solitude, until a hero comes looking to kill her just for the fame. Then another hero and another. She spends years dodging men who would kill her because of her curse, tormented because of a choice made for her, until one day one of those heroes, Perseus, actually succeeds and murders her. She wasn't a villain with a point. She was a tragic story to warn girls about the perils of being too beautiful. Athena also cursed her sisters at the same time, even though they weren't involved at all. There are 3 Gorgons. Jim Leahy. Sure, he might be a drunken shitbird, but all he wants as trailer park supervisor is to make Sunnyvale a half decent place to live. Instead, he is getting constantly fricked over by nearly everyone in the park. Jim Leahy is a fricking drunk and he always will be. The Wicked Witch. She just wanted her sister's shoes. Glinda comes along, magics them onto Dorothy's feet, and antagonizes the witch. That's because the good witch, in the movies, is a combination of 2 separate characters from the book. Scorpius from Farscape. Yeah, he is a relentlessly immoral, manipulative bastard and sometimes murderer, but the Scarons he wants to defeat are every bit as bad and as dangerous as he says, possessing superior forces to the Peacekeepers and with an intent to enslave the entire galaxy. By that standard, Scorpius' methods are extreme but maybe necessary. I'm surprised and happy to see this here. Benny from the musical Rent. He just wanted his friends to get jobs and pay their rent like responsible adults. He even goes so far as to offer his 2 former roommates free rent and guaranteed jobs in their field. In New York City, which is not only one of the most expensive places to live in the world, but also one of the most saturated arts markets in the world. All he asks in return is that they get Maureen to cancel her crappy performance art so that businessmen who own a property can develop it. But no, that would be selling out. Then his friends act like dongs at a cafe and shame him in front of his business colleagues. Then, to add insult to injury, Egil kills his dog. She kills his dog and the protagonists just laugh it off. Morgan Freeman in Gone Baby Gone. Spoilers. He plays a police chief that kidnaps a child from a druggy mother and fakes the child's death so he can raise her in a normal home. The hero finds her, reports the crime, the police rescue the child, arresting the chief. Child goes back to druggy mother. The last scene shows the mother about to go on a date in 2 minutes and hadn't even arranged a sitter yet. It's a heartbreaking movie. It's a great example of a movie where right and legal are often on exact opposite ends of the spectrum. Read the book. Read all the books in that series. I highly recommend them. But if you don't want to, then I at least recommend reading the final one, Moonlight Mile. I don't want to spoil what happens, but it does give a continuation on the story from Gone Baby Gone. And yes, it is heartbreaking in the book too. In Fallout 1, the Master is turning everyone into mutants in order to ascend humanity. The mutants are stronger, smarter, and more adapted to surviving the wasteland compared to the normals. Laboratories have been built for the sake of producing these mutants, and there is even a religion dedicated to the worship of the Master. You are tasked with putting a stop to this, and it isn't until you find out that the mutants are sterile that you can then convince the Master that his plan simply won't work. If everyone is turned to mutants, they will all eventually die out due to being unable to reproduce. Giving him proof of this information causes him to give up on this idea and kill himself. This, in my opinion, is A+ character development and a case where the antagonist isn't necessarily a villain. You oppose his ideas, but he isn't going through with something for the sake of being evil. Being a mutant has clearly defined benefits, and the final confrontation you two have makes him realize all his work has been for nothing just because of that one flaw. He realizes then that being a mutant is not the best course for humanity. The unity will bring about the Master race. Master, one able to survive, or even thrive, in the wasteland. As long as there are differences, we will tear ourselves apart fighting each other. We need one race, one goal, one people, to move forward to our destiny. I can still hear his voice in my head. Lex Luthor. He's afraid that too much reliance on superpowered heroes, Superman specifically, will stall human ingenuity and progress. He also thought it was bad to constantly believe that an alien would always have Earth's best interest in mind. If he decided to team up with other aliens, we'd have no way to fight back. Not really a villain, but Jason Todd has a good point on why Batman won't kill irredeemable characters like the Joker, since Joker will keep getting out and killing more and more people. He is more of an anti-hero, but he often challenges Bruce on his moral ground. Under the Red Hood had him as more of the anti-hero, whereas Batman Arkham Knight he was the villain. Mewtwo from the first Pokemon movie. He was created just to be a tool for destruction, and then eventually favors that our own actions decide who we are, and to not be judged on where we came from. Mewtwo just wanted to find his place in the world. I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Dr. Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. His brother was such a self-entitled dong, and his parents obviously had favorites. Tom from the Tom and Jerry cartoons. Mice are disease-spreading freeloading vermin, and he was just doing his job as a houseguard. He often gave the mouse plenty of warning to vacate the premises. He feels bad for Jerry a lot too. He kicks him out of the house, which is his job, then gets sad when it's raining outside, brings him in and feeds him and comforts him. Then Jerry kicks him out. Loki. His father raised him to hate his own species, frost giants, and had him in Thor's shadow his whole life. He is heartbroken when he finds out he is one of them, and can never be on the throne of Asgard. Odin does not deny this, so he lets Loki go as far as killing his biological father to show that he is worthy of the throne. Odin does not care in the slightest, and when Loki is hanging off a cliff saying that he could have defeated his enemies, for Odin, for Asgard, Odin says no, causing Loki to attempt to kill himself. Pretty much any villain from Pirates of the Caribbean. Barbossa in the first movie wanted to break a curse so that he and his crew could actually feel stuff again. Davy Jones wanted Jack Sparrow to pay his due instead of procrastinating and cheating him. And in the latest movie, Salazar wants to kill Sparrow because he's the reason Salazar's crew is all cursed. Like Barbossa, he too wants to be human again. The problem is Barbossa had no morals before then, nor did the crew. First they mutiny against their captain, then they spend 10 years killing innocent civilians just so they can be uncursed. The one dude was right, they deserve to be cursed. Benny from Rent. He's a young black guy from New York who's made good and wants to use his success to improve his neighborhood, and his butthole poor because its cool hipster friends are constantly undermining him. And yet he pays for the funeral of the person who murdered his dog, looks out for Angel's boyfriend after the funeral while everyone else is bitching about their personal drama, and is the only one besides Maureen Joanne who recognizes that pretending to be poor because you think it makes you artistic is stupid as frick. Team Benny for life. Also, basically any antagonist in a competition movie who's actually good at what they do because they've been training their whole lives and dedicate huge amounts of hard work to being very good at it, and are not exactly thrilled about having to face and potentially lose to some schmuck who picked up musical theater, karate, baseball, what have you 2 weeks ago to impress a girl, and is only good at it because the plot says so. 15-year-old me thought that Benny was a corporate butthole antagonizing his creative, free-spirited, loving friends. 25-year-old me is Benny. Grand Admiral Thrawn. From the Star Wars Expanded Universe, knowing a serious threat was looming over the galaxy and having seen the damage constant infighting could bring, he believed that a republic, like democracy with innumerable alien species competing for power, would only result in a weak and unprepared galaxy. He thus favored the sort of strong, central authority the Galactic Empire emphasized. Lo and behold, said threat arrives. The new republic is proven to be completely unprepared and immediately suffers from infighting and betrayal, as well as everyone being already badly depleted, the galaxy having spent the last 30 years in civil war. Full stop. It's not even our empire did nothing wrong propaganda. Thrawn knew there was plenty the empire did wrong. He just felt it was still the better of a lot of bad options. I like how in Princess Mononoke you are presented with both sides' perspectives and neither is bad, although they see each other that way. I always thought Timon from The Legend of Korra made some pretty valid arguments. He obviously was creepy and authoritative, but his message really seemed to resonate with non-benders, whom many seem to feel genuinely oppressed and overshadowed by benders. Telok especially did not help in that regard. In the modernizing world of Avatar, one could also argue the role of the bender is becoming increasingly obsolete. All of the villains had valid points, they just went way too far. Handsome Jack. Pandora was a freaking shithole. It was filled with the worst people. Sure, killing them all might not have been the best way to deal with it, but it wasn't the worst idea. He was right until he started going overboard, playing the pre-sequel all the way there, you get it, except those few things that don't seem 100% kosher. Pandora is a shithole though, undeniably. Shere Khan in the live-action Jungle Book. Don't let that human in. His dad set fire to my face. Nobody listens. Don't let that human in. He'll set fire to the forest. Nobody listens. Human sets fire to forest. Human kills Shere Khan with fire. Everyone is inexplicably happy that the endangered tiger died. Squidward. SpongeBob is the story of a mildly retarded sponge and an extremely retarded starfish bothering their neighbor who just wants to be left alone. Ursula the Sea Witch from The Little Mermaid made a bit of a good point. Don't go signing contracts you haven't read and understood. The problem arises when Ursula actively tries to screw people over to make sure the contract is breached. If Ursula had remained a passive figure, she wouldn't really be a villain at all, just some weird half-octopus witch. The lemon stealing W. Most of those dang lemons were all over the ground anyway, so she stole a couple. Does that warrant punishment? One of them needed to be made an example of, else there would be no lemons left at all. I am late, but Elmer Fudd. First encounter with Bugs Bunny ended with him being thrown into a lake and Bugs watched and laughed as he drowned. All Elmer wanted to do is nature photography. His grudge is justified. Ozymandias was right. In order to stop a world in the brink of nuclear war, tragedy needs to strike in order to unite all of mankind against a common enemy. Millions died so that billions would be saved. I think one of the takeaways from that story was that even Ozymandias didn't know everything. Ultimately, he was sacrificing people to prevent a possible future, but not a certain one. Makes the math more fuzzy. She's not really a villain per se, but the older I get, the more I side with Emily Gilmer. Lorelai regularly reacts really childishly and it's hard to write it off as choosing a different life every time. Sometimes it's just being an idiot. Every not crappy villain has a point. Best ones have one that you agree with. It's the means they go through to get their point across that makes them a villain. Littlefinger has a point. He may be a callous, ruthlessly ambitioned son of a bee, but in an oligarchical society obsessed with inherited status, he is basically a self-made man. I see him as a representative of meritocracy, and it's hard not to respect that, even though his methods and underlying motives are extremely questionable. Littlefinger did belong to a noble house, even if a very minor one. There is a better nothing to something story. Lex Luthor, the man had it all. Billionaire philanthropist, likely the most brilliant man on the planet and a business sense that combined the best of Gates and Buffet. A god crash lands on your planet and amasses an immense following from the public and a large number of post-humans. These post-humans form a world police force that literally orbits the planet and enforces good behavior. Most world governments lack the ability to resist and fall in line. Most other governments are brainwashed into allowing this moral police to enforce their moral compass upon the public they were elected to protect. Lex fights back. He is labeled as a terrorist by these so-called superheroes and repeatedly thrown into prison for trying to resist a god enforced his will upon our planet. Sid from Toy Story. He just played in a weird way with toys he didn't know were alive. The real villain in Toy Story is Woody. He attempted to murder Buzz Lightyear and was a dong all the time. Egil from Xenoblade Chronicles. He had to kill all life on Bionis in order to prevent Zanza from awakening and resetting the entire universe. He eventually gets on the same side as the heroes when Zanza awakens, but even when he was still in villain mode he was only doing what was right for his people. Gonna go way back. People of Innsmouth. The people of Innsmouth had been living as they had for generations. They could have continued to live in that way for the foreseeable future. Even the deep ones have a point in that they have their own needs, cultures, and values and were engaging in honest-to-God trade with the humans. It also didn't seem like any of the people living there had problems with what was going on. They might have a little discontentment due to poverty, but that was the whole seaboard at that time. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.